My name is Elena Moore. I was 20 years old when I learned how quickly a life can be erased, not by fire or disaster, but by 3 quiet text messages sent while someone else was eating dinner. The first message came in while I was sitting in the far corner of the university library, surrounded by half-open books and cold coffee cups. My phone vibrated once against the table. I almost ignored it. I wish I had, Bar. I sold the furniture from your room. The bed, the desk, your computer, everything. For a second, my brain refused to process the words. I reread them slowly, as if rearranging the letters might reveal a different meaning. Sold, your room, everything. I typed back a single line. Bar, what are you talking about? Bar, the reply came almost immediately, calm and perfectly punctuated like this was a normal household update. Your aunt needs help. She's struggling with the baby. Family comes before comfort. Bar, my chest tightened so suddenly I had to push my chair back and stand up. The library felt too small, too quiet. My laptop sat open in front of me, the same laptop I'd picked up extra shifts to pay off, the one I carried everywhere because it held my classes, my work, my entire schedule. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking hard enough that my phone slipped and nearly fell. Bar, you sold my bed, I typed. Where am I supposed to sleep when I come home? Where am I supposed to study? Bar, there was a pause this time. The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. If you're going to be dramatic, the message finally read, you can stay in the storage room. Your cousin needs the space now. I felt a ringing in my ears so loud it drowned out the sound of pages turning around me. Storage room, like I was a box that could be moved out of the way. I swallowed and typed one last message, slower than the others, my heart pounding as if I already knew the answer. Please tell me you didn't touch Grandpa's watch. The watch had been the one thing I never worried about. He'd given it to me quietly on my 18th birthday, slipping it into my hand like it was a secret. He'd worn it for decades. I wore it whenever I needed to feel steady. The reply came back without hesitation. I sold it. Someone offered $280. We needed it. No apology, no explanation, just a number. Something inside me went completely still. I didn't cry. I didn't type another word. I closed my laptop, shoved it into my bag, and walked out of the library like I was on autopilot. I passed people I knew. I ignored my phone as it started buzzing again. I walked straight to the parking lot, got into my car, and drove. I didn't feel the cold. I didn't feel the traffic. I just drove. There was only one person who had ever questioned my mother's version of family first. One person who had ever noticed that somehow I was always the one expected to be understanding, flexible, grateful, and I was going to him. 2 hours later, I pulled into my grandfather's driveway. The porch light was on, casting a soft yellow glow across the steps. I sat in the car longer than I needed to, gripping the steering wheel, replaying the messages in my head like they were carved into my skull. I sold your bed. Live in the storage room. The watch was sold. 3 sentences, that was the price of my place in my own family. When I finally got out of the car, my face felt stiff, like I'd been crying without realizing it. I climbed the steps and knocked. The door opened almost instantly. "RL," my grandfather said, using the nickname only he used. His smile faded the moment he saw my face. "What's wrong?" Bar, that was all it took. The question cracked something open in me. I walked past him into the house, words spilling out before he could even close the door. I told him everything. About the texts, about my room, about the storage room comment, about the watch. I couldn't stop once I started. It all came rushing out like it had been waiting for permission. He didn't interrupt. He guided me to the couch, sat beside me, and let me talk until my throat hurt. As I spoke, my mind kept splintering into dark little what-ifs. I imagined going back to the house with my phone out, filming the empty room. I imagined posting it online. I imagined standing in front of a judge while someone finally said she was wrong. I also imagined something quieter. Packing what little I had left, disappearing, letting my mother wake up one day and realize I was gone. Revenge, escape, exposure. Every option collided in my head at once. She said I could sleep in the storage room. I finished, my voice breaking. And she sold your watch without even asking. My grandfather's expression changed. His jaw tightened, his eyes hardened in a way I'd rarely seen. "She sold the watch?" he repeated. I nodded, shame flooding me like I'd failed to protect something sacred. "I thought that was the one thing she wouldn't touch." He leaned back slowly. "I gave that watch to you," he said. "Not to her. She had no right." The room went quiet. Then he asked a question that cut straight through me. "Why do you think she chose your things instead of her own?" I stared at him. "Because she doesn't care about me." He shook his head. "She cares, but she chose your things because she believes you'll survive it. You're the strong one. You're the one she expects to absorb the loss without falling apart." The word landed heavy in my chest. "So I'm just expendable," I whispered. He met my eyes. "Exactly, and that's what has to stop." He stood and walked to a small cabinet I'd seen my entire life but never questioned. He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a thick folder, setting it on the table between us. "Your mother has been living off my support for years," he said quietly, opening it. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that she'd stand on her own eventually. He flipped through pages, bank statements, transfers, notes. Her name was everywhere. "I didn't want to involve you," he continued, "but selling that watch crossed a line." My stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" He looked at me steadily. "I'm saying you are not sleeping in a storage room, and I'm done letting her treat you like a backup plan." He slid an envelope toward me. Inside were copies of documents I barely understood, but I recognized enough to know they were serious. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go to my lawyer, and then we talk to her. Together." My heart started racing. "She's going to lose it." "Let her," he replied calmly. "She's been losing control over your life for years. This time, it stops." My phone buzzed on the table. Another message from my mother. "Why aren't you answering? Your cousin is upset. You're making everything harder." I turned the phone face down. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for not replying. And as I sat there in my grandfather's living room, with proof spread out on the table and a choice I'd never been allowed to make before, one question kept echoing in my mind. When the people who raised you treat your life like a resource they can spend, what do you do first? Fight them, expose them, or walk away? The next morning felt unreal, like the calm before a storm everyone pretends isn't coming. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my empty room. My desk gone. My bed stripped down to nothing but dust outlines on the floor. I woke before my alarm and lay staring at the ceiling of my grandfather's guest room, listening to the quiet hum of a house that had never demanded anything from me in return. Over breakfast, neither of us said much. My grandfather moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who had already made his decision and didn't need to rehearse it out loud. I kept checking my phone, watching the messages pile up without opening them. Missed calls. Guilt packaged as concern. Urgency framed as obligation. When we finally got into the car, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up. "You don't have to say anything today," my grandfather said as he backed out of the driveway. "If you freeze up, that's fine. I'll handle it." "I don't want you to fight my battles," I said quietly. He glanced at me. "This isn't just your battle. It never was." The house looked the same when we pulled up, but I noticed things I hadn't before. The porch cluttered with baby items that weren't mine. The front window decorated for a life I wasn't part of. It didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I'd been temporarily stored. My mother opened the door before we knocked. "So you really went running to him," she snapped, eyes locking on me. Unbelievable. The old version of me would have shrunk, would have apologized just to calm her down. Instead, I stepped aside and let my grandfather walk in first. "Clara," he said evenly, using her full name. "We need to talk." She scoffed and folded her arms. "About what? Her tantrum?" I pulled out my phone and unlocked the screen. My hands were steady now, which surprised me. "About this," I said, holding it up. She barely glanced at it. "I already told you I was helping family. You act like I sold your soul." "You sold my life," I said quietly. "You sold the things I worked for. You sold something that didn't belong to you." Her eyes flicked toward my grandfather for the first time, irritation flashing across her face. "Are you seriously encouraging this? She's being dramatic." He didn't raise his voice. That somehow made it worse. "The watch," he said. "You sold it." She stiffened. "It was in my house. It was not yours," he replied. "And selling it was theft." The word landed hard in the room. For a moment, no one spoke. Then her voice rose, sharp and defensive. "Don't you dare accuse me of that. I did what I had to do. I'm a mother. I make decisions. Mothers protect their children," he said. "They don't strip one to save another." A small sound came from the hallway. My cousin stepped into view, the baby balanced awkwardly against her shoulder. She looked exhausted, hollowed out. "Can we not do this right now?" she murmured. "The baby—" My mother turned on her instantly. "See what you've caused?" she said, gesturing at me. "Now everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster." I looked at my cousin. She wouldn't meet my eye. "Did you know she sold my things?" I asked gently. "The watch?" Bershi hesitated. "She said you were okay with it." You understood." For a bitter laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. "Did she tell you I was supposed to sleep in a storage room?" Silence. My grandfather set a folded paper on the table. "I spoke to my lawyer this morning," he said. "We reviewed everything, the money I've provided, the house, My mother's face went pale. "You wouldn't," she whispered. He looked at me. "Do you want me to?" For a split second, the room tilted. This was it. The moment where I could choose destruction. "I don't want her punished," I said slowly. "I want it to stop." He nodded. "Then here's what's going to happen," he said, turning back to her. "You'll repay the value of what you sold. You'll stop using my money without permission, and starting next month, you'll be paying rent. This house is no longer a safety net." Her mouth fell open. "You can't do that." "I already have," he said calmly. She turned to me, eyes blazing. "Are you happy now?" I met her gaze. "I didn't do this. I just stopped pretending. It was okay." She stormed out, the door slamming so hard the baby started crying. I stood there shaking, realizing something strange and terrifying. For the first time, the consequences weren't landing on me. And that changed everything. The silence she left behind felt heavier than the shouting ever had. The baby's crying echoed down the hallway. Sharp and fragile, like a reminder of who had always been protected and who had been expected to endure. My cousin rocked back and forth, whispering apologies I wasn't sure were meant for me or for herself. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who had been leaning on a wall that suddenly vanished. "I didn't know," she said again, her voice cracking. "She made it sound like you were fine. Like you'd offered." I never got the chance," I replied, and for the first time I realized how often that had been true. My grandfather exhaled slowly and gathered the papers back into his folder. "This isn't finished," he said. "We're doing this properly. Tomorrow." "What if she doesn't come?" I asked. "Then the paperwork still moves," he said. "Her absence doesn't stop the truth." That night my phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages came in waves, some angry, some manipulative, some dripping with false concern. I didn't open them. I couldn't. I felt like if I let her voice back in, even through text, I'd start doubting myself all over again. Lying awake in the guest room, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of losing my mother. I was afraid of losing the version of myself that existed only to keep her calm. The law office the next day was quieter than I expected. No drama, no raised voices, just neutral walls and the hum of a printer in the background. My grandfather's lawyer greeted us with practiced politeness, sliding documents across the table like, "This was just another Tuesday." The empty chair across from us felt like an accusation. "She may not show," I whispered. "She will," the lawyer said calmly, "or she'll regret not doing so." 5 minutes before the appointment, the door opened. My mother walked in wearing sunglasses indoors like she needed armor. She sat down without looking at me. "Let's get this over with," she said. "I have responsibilities." The lawyer began explaining the trust, the repayment plan, the rental agreement. My mother interrupted constantly, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You're giving her control?" she snapped. "Your granddaughter over your own daughter? Bar, I'm giving responsibility to the person who hasn't abused it, my grandfather replied. Bar, the paper slid toward her. She laughed, bitter and humorless. With what money am I supposed to pay this back? Do you think I'm hiding some secret account? Beer you took without asking, I said quietly. That doesn't disappear just because you needed it. Bar, her head snapped toward me. For the first time she really looked at me, not like a child to be managed, but like someone sitting across from her as an equal. I'm your mother, she said, her voice shaking. I did what I had to do. Be or no, I replied. You did what was easiest. Bar, the lawyer continued, paragraph by paragraph. Restrictions, limits, acknowledgments. With every line her confidence cracked a little more. Finally she whispered, if I sign this, I lose everything. Bar, I shook my head. You lose control of me, that's all. Bar, the room went silent. After a long moment she picked up the pen. Each signature felt like a door closing, not slammed, just firmly shut. When it was done, she looked hollow. Are you satisfied? She asked me. Bar, I'm clear, I said. There's a difference. Outside, my grandfather placed a hand on my shoulder. You did well. Bar, I feel like I burned a bridge, I said. Sometimes, he replied, that's how you find out which side was holding the fire. As we walked away, I couldn't stop thinking about the ink drying on those pages, about how something written down can change relationships forever. And I wondered whether boundaries, once set in black and white, could ever be erased without leaving scars. The fallout didn't explode, it unraveled. There were no screaming phone calls, no dramatic confrontations at family gatherings, just a slow shift in the air, like everyone suddenly realized the story they'd been repeating for years didn't hold up anymore. Word traveled fast, it always does in families like ours, but this time the details mattered. Numbers, dates, receipts. My grandfather didn't defend himself emotionally. He didn't argue. When relatives called, he explained calmly what had been sold, what had been paid for, and how long he'd been covering gaps no one wanted to acknowledge. For the first time, the question wasn't why I was being difficult. It was why no one had noticed how much had already been taken. At the house, the change was immediate. My mother read every bank alert like it was written in a foreign language. The first month, she managed the rent. The second month, she started snapping at small things. By the third, I found her sitting at the kitchen table late at night, surrounded by envelopes, staring at them like they might rearrange themselves if she waited long enough. Bar, I didn't live there anymore. My grandfather offered me the guest room without conditions, and for once, I didn't argue. I let myself accept help without paying for it with guilt. Bar, I still visited, not out of obligation, but to make sure boundaries didn't turn into abandonment. That was when I met Mara. She was in her 40s, calm, composed, carrying a folder thick with charts. A financial counselor, my grandfather explained. Someone who dealt with family messes for a living. My mother bristled instantly. So now I need lessons, she muttered. Mara didn't react. She laid the papers out and started asking simple questions. Income, expenses, debts, real numbers, no vague promises, no emotional justifications. Every time my mother tried to frame a choice as sacrifice, Mara gently redirected it back to consent. No one is saying you can't help your niece, she said. We're saying you can't do it by destabilizing someone else without their agreement. Then she turned to me. Do you feel your needs were treated equally? Or the room went quiet. No, I said. They were negotiable. My mother's face crumpled. Shh. E finally admitted what she'd never said out loud. Helping my cousin made her feel needed. It made her feel like she was fixing the past. But you fixed it by breaking me, I said softly. The session ended without shouting. Just numbers adjusted and limits written down. Consequences disguised as spreadsheets. Later that night, she asked me a question without looking up. Do you really think I saw you as disposable? I think you saw me as forgiving, I answered, and you relied on that. The words hurt us both. Months passed. Life settled into something steady. I worked. I studied. I slept without worrying about my space disappearing overnight. Stability gave my mind room to breathe. That was when a professor assigned a project on financial abuse within families. I didn't plan to make it personal. But once I started writing, I couldn't stop. I stripped away names and details, but the truth remained. A parent who used sacrifice as leverage. A child treated like an emergency fund. I recorded a voiceover and uploaded it as an unlisted video for class.br. Then I forgot about it. Until one night my phone lit up, .br. The video had been shared .br hundreds of times. Then thousands .br. The comments weren't arguments. They were confessions. People saying they thought they were crazy. That they thought gratitude meant silence. I panicked at first. What if my mother saw it? What if she recognized herself? But something shifted as I kept reading. This wasn't exposure. It was recognition. When I visited again, the house looked different. Fewer luxuries. Smaller things. Consequences settling in quietly. "What kind of content are you making?" my mother asked. I told her the truth. Her face went still. "So you told everyone I'm a monster?" I told the pattern," I said. "If you see yourself in it, that's not something I can fix for you." That night, I realized revenge didn't look like ruining her life. It looked like removing the illusion she'd been living inside. A year after the text messages that started everything, I stood on the same front steps where I'd once frozen, unsure whether I was allowed to take up space in my own life. This time, there was a moving truck in the driveway. My mother stood on the porch with her arms crossed as two men carried the last pieces of furniture out of the house. The rooms behind her looked hollow, stripped of the comfort she'd once insisted she deserved. "So it's really happening," I said. She didn't turn around. "Rent went up again," she replied flatly. "I thought I could manage. I couldn't." My cousin had moved closer to her job. The baby was older now. Everyone had landed somewhere, just not where they'd started. "Where will you go?" I asked. "A small apartment," she said. "No yard, no room for speeches about family." We sat on the steps like we used to when I was younger, before responsibility became a weapon. After a while, she spoke again. "I watched your videos." My chest tightened. "All of them?" "Enough," she said. I was angry at first. Then I read the comments. She paused. "They sounded like you." I nodded. "They are?" She stared at her hands. "I wanted to be the mother I didn't have. I ended up becoming the one I hated." That admission didn't erase the past, but it cracked something open. "What hurt the most," I said, "was realizing you never would have questioned yourself if I hadn't forced the issue." She winced. "I thought you were strong." I was," I replied. "That didn't mean I was supposed to bleed quietly." The movers drove off. The house stood empty. "So what now?" she asked. I took a breath. "We don't pretend, we don't rewind, we keep boundaries, and we see if something healthier can grow." She nodded slowly, like she was learning a new language. Later that week, I filmed another video. Not about documents or trust funds, just the truth. That wanting stability doesn't make you selfish. That protecting yourself isn't betrayal. That love without boundaries isn't love. It's control dressed up as sacrifice. When I finished, my grandfather was outside watering his garden. "You sound different," he said. "I don't feel like I'm telling a revenge story anymore," I replied. "What does it feel like?" "Recovery." He smiled. "That's better." Somewhere across town, my mother was learning how to live without borrowing from the future of her children. My cousin was balancing her own responsibilities. And I was finally building a life that didn't require my disappearance for someone else's comfort. People still ask me if my mother changed. Not completely. People don't transform overnight. But now, when she slips into old language, I stop her. And she listens. Maybe that's the real ending. Not punishment, not forgiveness, just clarity. So if you're watching this and you've been told your patience is proof you owe more, your silence is agreement, and your sacrifice is love, ask yourself this, how long will you let other people write your role before you pick up the pen? Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do for your family is refuse to disappear for them.